$80 billion. That wasn't the revenue. That was the hole. When the final accounting was done on what might be the largest financial fraud in human history, this wasn't just a bankruptcy. It was an extinction event for trust in the digital age. Most people saw a billionaire genius in a t-shirt. They saw a savior who promised to fix a broken financial system. But behind the stadium sponsorships and the Super Bowl ads, there was a secret. A secret that would eventually vaporize the life savings of millions. This is the story of how the world's most trusted crypto exchange turned out to be a house of cards. This is the collapse of FTX. To understand the apocalypse of FTX, we first have to understand the prophet who built it. Sam Bankman-Fried. SBF. The man they called the king of crypto. Before he was public enemy number one, he was a kid from MIT. He was quiet. He was unassuming. He was a nerd who seemed to care more about changing the world than buying a yacht. He practiced something called effective altruism. The idea was simple. Make as much money as possible, just so you can give it all away. It was the perfect story. It made him the most likable billionaire in the world. But before there was an exchange, there was a hedge fund. Alameda Research. In 2017, Sam realized something vital. Bitcoin was trading at a different price in Japan than it was in the US. It was a simple glitch in the matrix. Alameda exploited it. They printed millions of dollars almost instantly. Alameda was the cash cow. A quiet, secretive empire tucked away from the public eye. It was the engine that started it all. But a hedge fund needs capital to grow. And Sam wanted to grow faster than anyone in history. In 2019, FTX was born. The slogan was brilliant. Built by traders for traders. It promised a better experience. It promised more safety. It promised the future of finance. Almost overnight, it exploded. The growth wasn't just fast. It was vertical. SBF wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a master of perception. He understood that in finance, perception is reality. He spent billions to make sure you knew his name. He bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat Arena. He put his logo on Formula One cars. He hired Tom Brady and Larry David for Super Bowl commercials. To the world, FTX was the gold standard. It was the adult in the room. SBF spent his days in Washington, D.C., talking to regulators. He was the only crypto guy the politicians actually liked. He looked like a genius who just forgot to brush his hair. He slept on a beanbag chair in his office. He drove a Toyota Corolla. He was the billionaire who didn't want his billions. And the world fell for it. Venture capitalists poured money into FTX. At its peak, the company was valued at $32 billion. But while the lights were bright in the front office, the back office was a disaster. Underneath the glossy surface, the walls were already rotting. The relationship between FTX and Alameda Research was supposed to be a wall. In reality, it was a revolving door. FTX was the casino. Alameda was the high-stakes gambler. And the gambler was losing. As the crypto market started to turn cold in early 2022, Alameda began making bad trades. They were losing billions. They needed a lifeline. This is where the tragedy turns into a crime. SBF had a secret. A literal backdoor in the code of the exchange. This loophole allowed Alameda to run a negative balance. It meant Alameda could pull money directly from the pool of customer deposits. Every time a regular person put their Bitcoin or their life savings onto FTX for safekeeping, Alameda could take it. They used your money to fund their gambles. They used your money to buy luxury penthouses in the Bahamas. They used your money to buy influence. And nobody knew. The house of cards relied on a single token. FTT. This was FTX's own digital currency. It was essentially a loyalty point they created out of thin air. They told the world it was valuable. Then, Alameda used that thin air token as collateral to borrow more real money. It was a feedback loop of fake value. As long as the price of FTT stayed high, the lie stayed alive. But in the world of finance, lies have a way of finding the light. The end began with a single article. In November 2022, a report from CoinDesk revealed a leaked balance sheet from Alameda. It showed that the hedge fund's foundation was made almost entirely of FTT. It wasn't backed by gold or dollars. It was backed by Sam's own magic trick. The market froze. People started asking questions. If Alameda was broke, was FTX safe? The man who held the answer was SBF's biggest rival, CZ, the CEO of Binance. CZ saw the opening. He announced on Twitter that Binance would be selling its entire position of FTT. It was a vote of no confidence heard around the world. The price of FTT began to crater. And then, the bank run started. Fear is a wildfire in the crypto world. Within 72 hours, customers tried to withdraw $6 billion from FTX. But the money wasn't there. It was gone. It was sitting in Alameda's losing trades. It was spent on political donations and celebrity checks. The vault was empty. SBF tried to project calm. He tweeted that FTX was fine. He said the assets were fine. It was a final, desperate lie. Behind the scenes, he was begging for a bailout. He even went to CZ, the man who started the fire, and asked him to buy the company. For 24 hours, it looked like a deal might happen. But after Binance looked at the books for one day, they walked away. They saw the $8 billion hole. They saw the chaos. They realized FTX wasn't a business. It was a crime scene. On November 11, 2022, the empire officially fell. FTX filed for bankruptcy. SBF resigned. The king of crypto was stripped of his crown. The scenes in the Bahamas were surreal. A group of 20-somethings who had been running a multi-billion-dollar empire from a luxury mansion were suddenly facing the end of their lives as they knew it. The betrayal was total. Not just to the investors, but to the very idea of cryptocurrency. The aftermath was a slow-motion car crash. SBF was arrested and extradited to the United States. His inner circle, his closest friends, turned on him. They pleaded guilty. They told the feds everything. They described a culture of total recklessness. There were no boards of directors. There were no real accountants. It was just a group of kids playing with billions of dollars of other people's money. In 2024, Sam Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The boy wonder was gone. In his place was a convicted felon. But the real victims aren't the celebrities or the venture capitalists. The victims are the teachers, the students, and the families who thought FTX was a safe place to build a future. They lost everything. The collapse of FTX didn't just take money. It took the credibility of an entire industry. It proved that in the digital frontier, the oldest rules of greed still apply. Technology can change how we trade, but it can't change human nature. The story of FTX is a dark reminder. It reminds us that when something looks too good to be true, it usually is. It reminds us that a t-shirt and a smile aren't a substitute for a balance sheet. We live in an era where fame is often confused with trust. SBF sold a dream of a better world while he was busy destroying the one he was in. The blockchain was supposed to be about transparency. But the biggest fraud of our generation happened right in front of our eyes, hidden by a layer of hype and a mountain of lies. As the dust settles, the crypto world is different. It's colder. It's more cynical. The lesson of FTX is painful but simple. Trust is easy to build with $1 billion marketing budget. But once it's broken, it may never come back. The keys to the future were supposed to be in our hands. Instead, we gave them to a man who didn't even know how to lock the door. The collapse of FTX wasn't a failure of technology. It was a failure of us. We wanted to believe in a hero. And in the end, we got exactly what we paid for. The lights in the FTX arena are off. The logos are being scrubbed from the walls. The beanbag chairs are empty. All that's left is the silence of an empty vault. And the echoes of a promise that was never meant to be kept.